Hi, folks, and welcome to our session on LinkedIn. Excited to have you here for this workshop. And as you are entering the room here, what I would love for y'all to do is go ahead and copy and paste your LinkedIn profile into the chat so that we can all do some networking here in this session. That's part of the goal, is to do some networking with this group. So yeah, if you are just joining, I am inviting everyone to share their LinkedIn profile, a link to it in the chat. So excellent. I see some folks coming in. Yes, that's your first assignment coming into this workshop, is to paste your LinkedIn profile into the chat. Thank you, those who have done it. Excellent. We're going to have some fun today. So I'm going to give it maybe one more minute. We've got a few more folks joining. Wonderful. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Marina, Maggie and Sheeran, Azakzai. Thank you. Yeah, if you're just joining, thanks. Aaron, Tim, fantastic. Okay. So friends, we are going to get started here in a sec. My goal for this session is actually to make it pretty interactive and leave you with hopefully some useful tips, but make this as targeted as possible for your LinkedIn journeys. And I see some familiar friends here. Carmen, excited to have you joining us. That's great. I thought it'd be fun to do a session that was a little more practical than some of the, not that the other G2DF sessions are not practical, but one that was really focused on you and something that all of us who are professionals in this modern era focus on, which is LinkedIn. And those of you who follow me, I see a couple of familiar faces, have seen for a number of years now. I have really invested deeply in this particular platform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a couple slides. Going to talk a bit about LinkedIn more broadly, some tips and tricks on my journey. While we're doing that, this is kind of a fun bonus for this particular session. Maggie, who is one of my esteemed colleagues at Tech Change, Maggie is going to be doing graphic facilitation as we go. So one of the cool things about this session is you're going to see it first. You all have that early access to Maggie's incredible work, but we're going to cut some of these up and actually share these on LinkedIn as sound bites and tips and tricks for folks. But as we do that, I do want to make this highly relevant for y'all. So want to make good use of the chat for being able to drive the conversation where you want it to go, to answer your LinkedIn questions, make this as relevant as possible for you. So, and then yes, thanks Sharon for reminding. If you joined a bit late, I am inviting everyone to go ahead and drop their LinkedIn profile links into the chat so that we can all network with each other. So with that, I'm gonna share my screen and start talking a little bit about I've got 4 or 5 slides here, and then I've got some suggested questions and topics I'd love to tackle, but I really want to hear from you all and make this as relevant as possible for the 20 to 30 folks we have in the room. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to make sure this gets big. All right, friends, everybody can see this okay? Good, fantastic. Okay, so pretty incredible to think about the reach of LinkedIn, something that I spent a bit of time preparing for this session on. But we are now in a world where we're almost at 1 billion people in the world on LinkedIn. And that, for those of us that live in the United States, oftentimes we think of it as a US social network born out of Silicon Valley, but it is global, and it is global big time. And I can honestly say that a lot of my following and groups that follow me are not based in the US, but in other countries, seeing large populations in India and so forth, really starting to dominate a number of these conversations. Also a big place where companies spend their time. And we are coming up on the 20th anniversary. LinkedIn launched in 2003. I'm curious in the chat when you all joined. Maybe those who are watching can think back. How long ago was it that you joined? I think I was 2005, and I was so excited to get to that 500 person threshold, finding those connections, which I think it used to limit. But we're almost at the 20th anniversary next year. So some cool stats that you may or may not know about LinkedIn. 210 million job applicants are sent each month. 15 million or so jobs are listed. We are seeing, and this stat is a little bit old, I tried to find something newer, but I would definitely agree with this trend. More and more remote jobs are being posted on the network, and we can talk more about this trend and talk more about what we really mean by remote, but I think this is critical for the international development, digital development community, how we find new ways to hire and work with each other across global boundaries and borders. LinkedIn is helping to facilitate a lot of that, and we're seeing that trend for sure. 4 people are hired through LinkedIn every minute. That's pretty incredible to think about, that level of velocity. But there's some other really interesting stats that have emerged. There was a great study done that said that if people are hiring through LinkedIn, through the site itself, that those folks that are hired are actually 40% less likely to leave the company in the first 6 months. So there's some stickiness to being able to recruit. And then for those that might be curious about how recruiters are working, I think this is really the lifeblood of recruitment, especially now in what is a very kind of employee-centric market. Everyone's using LinkedIn to figure out how and where to connect. And I can't see the chat here, so if there are some questions coming up, let me know as we go. Okay, so, a little bit of background on the journey that I took. So I want to say in 2019, this was pre-pandemic, I had said I want to get serious about one of the social media platforms, and I ran a bunch of tests on Twitter, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and LinkedIn overwhelmingly became the obvious choice for me. I'm not a visual person. I don't have visual outputs in my professional life. So that was one limiting factor for something like Instagram. I'm a writer, I'm an English major, so I'm a text-based person that tends to suit LinkedIn better. But I really wanted to figure out how to connect with folks. And I had at the time a mentor who was very, very dear to me, who used to be a board member at one of my nonprofits. And she had figured out how to go from 8,000 to 2.5 million in something like 2 years. And her big message to me in these early days was, Nick, think about the value that you can bring to other people's lives. And those of us that spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, we know that a lot of the time you're scrolling through the feed, and somebody got a job, and so got an award. It's a place where historically we tend to just live in the self-aggrandizing, and I think that culture has really shifted. I'm curious what others who are listening think, but that culture has shifted quite a bit. So I set out on a journey to figure out a posting cadence that worked for me, and to really focus on this value piece. And specifically, I wanted to be able to share job-seeking content for folks who are in our sector, international development, but also in the social impact space more broadly. And then to help share occasional wisdom, although I'm pretty careful about being too advice-y on LinkedIn. Sometimes people don't love that. But and then also sharing tech change events and courses like the one we are enjoying here. So that was a big part of the strategy, was like coming up and committing with to a posting cadence. And then a lot of what we'll talk about today is, if that feels intimidating for you, trying to figure out how you engage on other people's posts with comments early on when they post. This is critical. If you are not sure that you have enough ideas or content, I'm going to challenge you on that, because I think everybody does. But if you are not sure that you can commit to that 3 to 5 times of posting a week or whatever it is, then the best thing you can do is to do what I call a high value comment on somebody who is going to be getting a lot of traction on their daily posts, and make sure you post that comment within the first 20 minutes of that post going live. Why? Because the algorithm in LinkedIn loves early comments. So Megan, I see you're joining us live. You, I think, did this on one of my recent posts when I was inviting folks to share some ideas about networking, right? We were inviting, and you did an early post, and that post went viral in the thread. And so that is a big message here, is that it's not, you can't just say, hey, great post, right? You've really got to think about adding substance and depth and comment. We can talk a little bit about what a high value comment looks like if that is interesting for people, but I generally say find three kind of key elements. Find thank the person for their comment, mirror something that they said about their post, and then add something of significance or value in addition to their comment. So those three pieces, really critical. Like I said, I think that this kind of early traction is really important. How do you know if somebody is going to post? Well, and we'll actually maybe go on LinkedIn and talk about this, but there is a little bell on the top right of people's profiles. If you click on that bell, you will get notified when that person posts. And why is this important? Because we want to get those comments that you're going to have into the first 30 to 60 minutes after they post. So happy to answer questions there, but that's a bit of a hack that I think could be quite useful. And the last thing I'll say on this is I did make a conscious decision back in the day to just accept all friend requests. Now, this is somewhat controversial in the LinkedIn space. Do I accept a request from somebody who I don't know? I am a big believer that our networks are built in many ways, and we don't always know if someone is going to add value to our lives in the moment. But if we are open to some of those connections and opportunities, it's great. I've met many people who say, I am only going to accept connections of people I know, and that's my network. I think that, especially in pandemic and post-pandemic times, is a bit limiting, because I will say that some of the greatest humans I've met and who engage the most with my content on LinkedIn are people I've never met and in person. And so, wow, right? Like what an amazing realization to sort of lean on. So, all right, I'm going to stop there. Maggie, I'm going to cue you up for sharing our visual graphic recording. And then I might ask, since Sharon, I can't see any comments coming in, so if there are any questions that have come in that might be interesting to tackle based on this. And if you have a question here, I'm happy to go deeper on any of these items that we're looking at. So Maggie, maybe we'll switch over to you.
And just as Maggie's changing into her screen, I think we just had a few folks sharing some really good tips on how to find out when you join LinkedIn. So if anyone is curious, feel free to jump into the chat and follow the great comment left by our colleague, Raj.
I love it. All right, so here we are piloting this graphic recording piece. This looks beautiful, Maggie, really well done. And we are going to be making what will end up being a really beautiful, expansive canvas that we can share back. So, all right, so I asked y'all, what year did you join? I want to hear from you all next. How often do you post on LinkedIn? What is your current engagement strategy? I want to hear how you're using the platform. And then we'll try and see if we can get to some good places as far as what you want to be doing differently. What are the gaps in your journey that are not yet where you want to be as far as use? A lot of the folks that I interact with on a daily basis are I see Jennifer's on, great. A lot of the folks I interact with are much more, I would say, passive content folks. And when you are looking for a job, or if you are gearing up for a transition, whether it's between sectors or between organizations in the same sector, any kind of visibility, and I'm going to go back here to my screen, I think, as we're going, but this is a great start, Maggie. I'm excited. Any kind of visibility that you can generate for yourself is good. And so, while it might not feel natural to post, as we're going to talk a bit about now, I think I just want to really encourage you all to sort of see that everybody has something to say, right? And so I did a post I think last week about like 10 non-traditional uh, ideas for posts. Those include highlights from an article I just read, a documentary I just watched, an online course I just took. You could literally just take some of the tips from my session right here and do, here are 3 things I learned from Nick about LinkedIn today. Uh, what content seems to do well, I think, are, you know, I think around job seeking, but also around career advice. That tends to do quite well. But anything topically where you're looking to sort of demonstrate expertise, especially to a new organization you might want to work for, great to be able to use LinkedIn to do that. I'm seeing a lot of excellent content and communities pop up around coaching. I know, Megan, you're part of that, and Jennifer and others. And people building their whole kind of career and professional engines around LinkedIn. And so that's another thing. I have a LinkedIn coach. I'm a big believer in all things coaching, whether it's for getting better at social media in my case, or whether it's trying to figure out your passion or manage a career switch. And I often put up resources for folks on how to find the right coaches. But LinkedIn, highly recommend kind of thinking about this space as a way to make connections, but also seek the kind of support that you need in your life. All right, so I have a couple tips in here about the post itself. Again, I think being able to commit to a regular cadence, whatever that is. If you have creator mode, which is a feature you can basically turn on in your profile, I think it is available to most folks now. But if you have that, you can increase the amount of characters that you have access to in your posts, and it gives you that option for people to follow you instead of make those connections. I'm a big believer in making as many connections as you can. You have 30,000 to work with, so that's a lot to get you started, and so maybe you do want to have more folks follow you than connect with, but in those early days, maybe it matters less. I'm a big fan of posting between, I would say, 9:30 and 11 a.m. in Eastern time zone, whatever time zone you live in. That's a good block. There has been some interesting research done that like people tend to be on LinkedIn more during like lunchtime, morning before they start work, afternoon right after work. So I've got a couple of the times here. I think a lot of that is just being able to sort of have a data-driven approach to your posts, and that is something I'm also happy to talk about and pull up for y'all. I have been working with Austin Belkak, who is a LinkedIn coach. Some of you may know, and he has 1 or 2 million followers on LinkedIn. He's really done an amazing job. He's got me focused on the data-driven piece really aggressively, and so we're going in, we're tracking every post, we're tracking the engagement, we're tracking the impressions, and then we're tracking things like follower count and so forth. LinkedIn analytics in general are not great, but that is something that I've tried to feed back to the company a number of different ways. They've released some new analytics and metrics in the past 2 months, which are exciting, but there's still a long way to go. There is a third-party app that many folks use called Shield.ai, and Shield plugs into your LinkedIn profile, and it's a pretty decent dashboard that allows you to kind of connect the dots and see some of your analytics more directly. I know digital development folks are data-driven. That is one of our hollowed digital principles, be data-driven, and so I do think that, especially if you're trying to figure out where and how to spend your time and your resources, that can be a great resource to do so. So maybe I will stop there again and see if we've got some questions. These were some of the things that I could talk about today. I've mentioned a little bit about coaching, and I might invite Megan or Jennifer or others to share, what they think on that topic. Hi,
Nick. Question.
Yeah, what you got for me?
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between post and then writing article content, and how do you schedule yourself with regards to those two things, and how do you balance that when you have work to do
Well, well, first of all, Erica, great to hear your voice.
I have no idea who you are. What are you
Great,
talking about?
great. So
No,
here
I'm just joking. Nick and I went to college.
we did. We went to Swarthmore College together. Little did we know we'd be here talking about LinkedIn 20 years later, Erica. But here's what I would say. You
20
can't-
for you, 10 for me.
We're not allowed to date ourselves here. Here's what I would say, Erica. It can be a time suck, and I know you're a busy entrepreneur, building your business, as am I. And so, I would say, trying to sort of figure out the cadence that works for you. What my coach has tried to get me to do is to really limit to an hour a day. And so, again, if you think about deciding on a number of posts that you feel comfortable doing, and posts I'm going to define as when you're on your homepage, that text-based segment that you can add photos to, or is different from writing an article. And I would probably discourage folks from writing articles because of how the reach works. The one exception would be the article format is kind of morphed into the newsletter. And this is kind of neat. This is a neat hack for LinkedIn. And Erica, this might be relevant for you too. You can start, everybody has the option to start one newsletter on LinkedIn. The cool thing about that, this is really cool, is that when you launch your first newsletter, everybody in your network gets an automatic notification on the platform and over email that you have launched that newsletter. So, and the conversions are incredible. So I have about 130,000 followers, and I would say about 35% of those folks have now signed up for the newsletter. So it's a different format than the daily post, Erica, but it is, if you can commit to a monthly cadence for doing that, the advantage of the newsletter is that you can add links into your content and images without discouraging the algorithm. If you add links in the body of your daily posts, LinkedIn doesn't like that. It will discourage and limit the amount of impressions and likes that you get. So the constant game we are all in as folks who might want to drive traffic to our services, to our projects, to our brand, is that the minute we link off platform, we see 50 to 60% drop in the amount of impressions that we're likely to get. So it's a trade-off game. We've got to decide, how important is it for folks to get to that link, knowing that the impressions are going to go down. The other strategy is to put the link in the top comment. Yes, it's buried, but it does help to make sure that the post goes farther. So back to your question, Erica, I would say, finding out a cadence that works for you is the big piece. I recommend 3 times a week for folks that are starting, and an hour a day of engagement. So there's kind of the 3 pieces are, you want to generate your content, and I like to do this on Sunday nights. I will generate all 5 posts for the week. And then there is the actual posting of that, what I call kind of engagement with the post. So just when you post, your work's not done. You've got to actually respond to the comments that come in. You've got to try and continue to drive traffic to that. And that helps, right? The more people that comment on that post in the first, call it like 30 to 60 minutes, the more we're going to see it ultimately. And then the last piece is like dissemination. So what other networks and channels can you utilize to be able to drive traffic to your post that are off site? So I'm in a WhatsApp group. Occasionally I will ask my staff to comment on my posts, friends, small groups of friends who might share similar interests. So those are the 3 pieces, the kind of drafting and creation, the actual posting and engagement, and then the dissemination, because all 3 of those are really critical to getting this work. And then Jennifer's saying, if all else fails, you can just post kitten pictures. It turns out that people love those too. Yeah. I don't know, Erica, if that answers the question. Yeah. Any other questions?
Nick, quick one. This is
Hey.
Peter.
Hi, Peter.
I I liked your kitten. So nice game there. So I'm asking if I want to connect with Nick. I haven't met Nick before, but I see Nick has got the credentials and the things I really need. What steps should I take to ensure, like before I press that connect button, how will I entice Nick to feel like he wants or she wants to connect with me?
Yeah.
You've got some tips on that? Thank you.
I sure do. This is a good one. So Peter is asking, how do we get people to accept our connection requests? So there are kind of two tactics here. If you're gonna send a connection request to somebody, there's a lot of data that says if you add even a short note and you personalize that note, that person is up to 50% more likely to accept your connection request. So if you really want to connect with that person, first things first, write that note. You have a couple hundred characters, I think, to do that and to make your case. Now, if it's me getting that request, what is something that will automatically, no matter what, make me want to connect with somebody with or without a note attached to their request? If I have seen them comment on the last few posts of mine, and by comment I mean comment meaningfully, then not only am I willing to accept their connection request, but I'm also usually willing to hop on the phone for 15 minutes with them. And that is something that has really just been a great strategy for me. Because, at the point where somebody has meaningfully engaged with, say, like 3, 4, 5 of my posts over a certain period of time, I am so grateful to these humans, right? Because I am really excited about people that can connect with me in those first 60 minutes. So if they're commenting on my posts, I and then in turn want to figure out how to help them. It's a simple thing. So if you, it's a lot more time intensive, but, if you do want to connect with certain folks, demonstrating your own value in their journey and then asking for something is a great way to do it. And anybody who posts regularly is desperate for content. And I think about it's kind of funny. Like everyone's trying to do this at different levels. So I'll give you an example. Peter, I met this incredibly famous VC guy in a fellowship that I did in New Zealand. His name was David, and David was like the main VC behind TripAdvisor, right? Everybody loves TripAdvisor. He was the person that basically funded it. For whatever reason, I guess because David had started his new organization, a new fund, he decided he wanted to get serious about LinkedIn. Well, here's a guy who's, worth millions of dollars, extremely powerful, and like committed to a LinkedIn strategy, but cannot get anybody to comment on his goddamn posts. And so it was so fascinating to watch that, and there are probably tons of people who have wanted money from this human, right? Who have wanted engagement or wanted some value from him. And what he really needed in that moment over the first few months of his LinkedIn journey was just people to engage with the great stuff that he was sharing. And so, I use this example because the bar can be quite low, right? We just have to be looking out for those opportunities to see where they are and to think meaningfully about how we plug into other people's content journeys. Hopefully that's useful.
Thanks so much, Nick. I will go like your kitten, and thanks so much for sharing that with us. So thank you.
Yeah. Let's do a couple. Let's maybe stop. Maggie, do you want to show what you're working on? And then as we're doing that, let's try and tackle a few more questions. What do you think? I'm looking here. So Carmen, you're sharing number of your connections drives the visibility of your post. The higher number of connections, the higher possibility your post can be seen. That is exactly right. But we do also want to add to that first 60-minute window is so critical. So the worst thing you can do is just put something up and then disappear. You've really got to nurture and grow that post when you first post it. Because what the algorithm is doing in that moment is it's testing your content with like 10% of your followers or 10% of your connections. So the better that post does with that pilot group, the farther that reach is going to be. I think that's I think a really critical piece. Look at this coming together. This is great. Really, really impressed here, Maggie. All right, so Megan, do you want to hop on, Megan, and talk a bit about this question that you just asked?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I know it's nice to meet you face to face after connecting over LinkedIn. Appreciate your content. Um, so as I've been kind of implementing a lot of these strategies of, you know, 3 to 4, posting 3 to 4 times a week. I've been growing a career coaching business. So that's kind of my angle, is like finding new clients and just providing value to my network. And so I've just been agonizing now as I've been creating more, as you said, just sort of desperate for content. And so sometimes I'll really think through, you know, some concept, some, you know, what I'm doing. Other times I just whip something out in 5 minutes. And I find that the quicker posts tend to get more traction. And so I was just curious what your observations are about your own posts, and like how much time do you balance like being intentional, planning things out, but then also just sharing what's on your mind, stream of consciousness, and then letting it go.
Yeah, it's such a good question, Megan, because sometimes, the ones we labor on, this is true of life, right? The ones we labor on the most end up not landing for all kinds of reasons. And so I guess, a couple things I would say is I am at the point now where I will recycle posts that I know have done well, or ones that I thought would have done better, but I might have just like not landed my 60-minute window well with my group. And as you're talking, I might share my tracker with y'all so you can see it. I don't know how this is looking on the screen. Can you see this okay? So, I'm doing this work with Austin and, as I mentioned, but being able to sort of see what's doing well, from an engagement standpoint is a big piece. So I'm tracking with his help the topic and the kind of category. And for me, the things that tend to do really well are, lists of resources, whether they are jobs or opportunities. The best post I had this year, I think, was a personal story about unpaid internships. And I knew it wasn't, I knew so this had about 570,000 impressions. I knew this was going to do well. And I knew that I wanted to time it for Wednesday morning, which is my sweet spot for my audience. But, I labeled that as a personal experience plus reflection plus good practice. And so I am noticing trends where the more white space and the less text seems to do well. There are many LinkedIn experts that discourage, they call it broetry, which is, like, I was a poetry major, so I take offense to some of this, but a badly written narrative that is just like single line that people tend to read more efficiently and connect with, but it sort of insults the reader in that journey. That's at least the logic. So if you look at this post, this was definitely a broetry post. And let's see if we can get it right. Like, here I am. But I think it resonated, right? I think that like the strong hook is critical, because basically anything above like right about here is going to appear kind of above the fold in a sense. So that hook is really critical. But I got all kinds of elements in here. I got like a personal story. I have, failure and devastation. I have a commitment to do things differently. And then I have a call to action that, really this practice should end. And so, there are several of these themes that tend to do well on LinkedIn: unpaid internships, like transparency in the hiring process, return to office, right? So they're like, people are really against having to be forced back into an office. So trying to pick up on some of these trends can sometimes be useful. But really, Megan, you want to have it also just be authentic to you, because the further you get off into the LinkedIn trends, the more you're like, well, I got a lot of likes, but like from who, for what purpose? So, for me, it's a balancing act and trying to figure out, like, in the context of a week or a month or a year, like what are the audiences I'm reaching, and with what kinds of content. So hopefully that's helpful. I would say, getting into a cadence, last thing I would say is like Sunday night or whenever you can, like try and get into a groove to write a lot of content so that you're not scrambling in the week to do it. Because I find that I'm at my worst when I am like, oh, I don't have a post today, I'll just throw something up. And I tend to sort of shortchange myself and my audience. And the more I've thought through, I do find the better it gets. All right, let's take some more questions here. Let me pull up the chat again. Sharon, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. This is one that I've heard other women, but I'm sure it applies to more than just women, ask about is sort of what role does being really vulnerable, just vulnerability in general, play in kind of an overall engagement strategy? How much should we be kind of, really opening up and exposing? I think that post you just shared, Nick, was a prime example. So where should that come into all of this? So we're giving enough, but not overdoing it.
Well, I might invite Carmen and Jennifer on deck to share a few of their words of wisdom since they're in this session as well. But 100% Sharon, I think that like the LinkedIn world really craves that. I think social media craves that. I think it's just how do you find a way to be vulnerable in an authentic way is a really interesting exercise, because it can come off a million different ways. And like my first LinkedIn mentor, Kirsty Bonner, used to say, if you're going to take people down a kind of vulnerable, dreary, somewhat sad path, you've got to come out the other end with some meaning and guidance that isn't too heavy-handed, but which like is evidence that that's not where you're leaving folks. So, I think that's one way to do it, right? Because then it becomes about their story. But it's hard to get that tone right, and I think being able to do it in a condensed way so that it doesn't go too deep. I am certainly noticing more and more stories kind of using vulnerability, using kind of raw emotion to make points. LinkedIn is still trying to figure out how to emphasize or weight photos and video content in relationship to pure text. But and I agree here with Erica's point. Like there's got to be some common problem with your audience. Otherwise, it just becomes a bit of of like a trauma share. But I've seen it done well and I've seen it done badly. And then there's just, there's a lot of LinkedIn influencers who just like overuse this tactic, and it's just too much for me, right? It feels a little inauthentic. So, but it's a great question, and certainly seeing it used. I don't know, Jennifer and Carmen, I want to invite you all to the stage if you have anything you want to add to that. If not, that's fine.
Well, hi, Nick. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer. I think ultimately what I think about at the end of the day, and when I've worked with either clients or students, and I'm coaching them on their strategy of what to post on LinkedIn, with the intention that not everybody is selling something, or beyond maybe them, like their skills, is you don't, like if I'm working with someone who's looking to make a career move or a shift or pivot, you don't need to like create something that is like selling your soul around your vulnerability and your deepest stories, but you need to keep reminding yourself, like, what is authentic to my experience and how can I share that to be helping other people who maybe are having a similar journey. So I think that once you start, like you've said, veering off the path of like, I'm just going into influencer land, you're not going to, it's hard to reel yourself back. So I think for the majority of people, someone emailed me yesterday, like, I'm desperate, I'm looking for this job and can you help me? This is a friend of a friend. And I know that they are super uncomfortable on social media. And so it's like me telling them to, make a LinkedIn video about their darkest moment in their career is not going to land and not going to, yield a good outcome, because they will never do that. And it's not realistic, but anyway, so that would be my contribution.
It's tough because I love seeing stuff where people are honest about their failures. I think that, but it's sometimes even the failures become these weird humble brags, and it's just I of course, like, I really think that there is a market for some sort of parallel LinkedIn, alongside and maybe in between each of our career journeys of like, okay, here's the real side when
yeah, I feel like I've been seeing that more and more where I see somebody who I think, wow, they have a beautiful LinkedIn profile. And then they message me or we have a conversation and they're like, I'm in a really dark time and this isn't going well. And no one's responding to me. And I'm like, wow, you're the CEO or something, like not, or they've
Yeah,
owned their own company or
yeah,
they've done this or that.
yeah,
And the appearances of it. So it's a fine line to,
yeah.
balance.
And I think that gets into the like idea of not over comparing, because that is the easiest temptation on these platforms, is to be like, oh, well, especially on LinkedIn, like we are presented on LinkedIn with all of the alternative journeys we could have taken. We see all of our grad school classmates, we see all these humans we know, and so like trying to really be, clear about our own decisions and our own journey, um, takes some fortitude. It takes some,
Hmm.
because there are lots of things I'm sure all of us would have loved to have done, but we have one life, one path. So trying to kind of marry that with the right balance of future forward versus call it like learning from the past. All right. Should we take a question here from Sarah? Sarah, do you want to hop on and share a bit about your new direction, or you want us to just read this and go with it? I'm gonna give you 2 seconds.
Yeah, no, I can talk.
Yes.
That's fine.
All right, Sarah,
Um,
let's hear it.
so I'm currently a management consultant, and I've started my training to become a coach, and so I'm struggling a bit with how to start to change the type of content that I'm posting on there. My current network is not used for me to be portraying myself in that way.
Yeah. Well, look, definitely connect with Megan and Jennifer on here, but I would say, and I did a post on this, like following the top coaches on LinkedIn is a great way to start to think about how you want to position yourself. And I did a post on, I think it was 25 coaches, and I tried to break it down by different type of coaching. Some are more focused on our sector, digital development, so to speak. Some are more focused on, coaching for women, particularly. Some are kind of more have a DEI angle. And so part of it is within coaching, what's your niche? And then trying to follow folks that are already posting in this vein whose content you like. And I mentioned in the first part of this talk, like your first job is just to comment meaningfully, hit that like little bell button on their profile. Whenever they post, your job is to post meaningfully on their post. And doing that alone will start to kind of, you'll get a sense of the conversation, you'll get a sense of what people are engaging with, and you'll get ideas for what you should share in your own posts. So that would be where I would start. Again, I think there are so many fantastic coaches out there using LinkedIn as a platform to build their businesses, and I see a need for more. Like I was a little bit ambivalent about coaching a couple years ago. I am a true believer. I think that coaching is the most transformative thing. And so, I think there's room for more for sure. So that would be my advice, would be to find some of these folks, and I'll see if I can dig up and share in the chat before we end here that 25 like coaches I recommend following. And then I know, Sharon, you're in a coaching group as well with Shannon, and that's a neat community that is more international development focused. And so Sarah, if that's your sweet spot, that would be a good community to plug into as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think starting off by commenting on other people's posts is a nice way into it, rather than the posts that I'm creating specifically on my profile being a big shift in dynamics, so that my network isn't like, what on earth is Sarah up to now, sort of thing. That's the big fear, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's a more, hopefully a more approachable strategy.
Yeah.
All right, I love this question, and I hope I'm saying your name right here, but Hytham it asked the question that all of us are probably wondering, which is, I've got this amazing report. It's a World Bank document. I've just spent 6 months on this thing. I put it up on LinkedIn, and nobody looks at it. Nobody reads it. Nobody engages with it. And again, I think this kind of, Hytham, connects to some of what we've been talking about, which is you've got to build that community so that when you post, there are people ready to consume your content. And then you've got to think about how you package that in the most interesting way. I know that plenty of us have read World Bank reports and been like, oh my God, I can't get through this. But I will give you a specific example, Hytham. Pre-pandemic, I had some very dear friends at the World Bank who were releasing a report on digital identity, and they were struggling, just like you've suggested here. Nobody was reading this. So I went over to the bank, and we filmed a minute and a half, super dorky video with them in their office, basically kind of each one saying a different line, holding up the report. And that little like small pre-TikTok thing just like went viral in ways that they were not expecting. So it wasn't that we did anything different to the report. It was just that we thought about a new way to make the content a little more engaging and get people to pay attention. I'm a big believer in pulling out quotes, in putting them on cards, in maybe filming short sound bites. Again, we are in a world where everybody's attention spans are diminished. So what are the key things you do want folks to take away? And then how do you get that into 60 seconds or less? Again, might also be worth thinking about your audience, because maybe it doesn't matter that tens of thousands of people are reading this. Maybe it's just the right 5. And so how do you make the case to those 5? This is really the piece of content that's going to be transformative for their journey. Hopefully that's helpful. And if anybody else, I've got 10 minutes left, anybody else has insights on how to share that piece of content that just does not lend itself well to social media, feel free to weigh in. Let's see here. Maybe
Nick,
Tim,
I have a question for you.
Yeah, Tim, do you want to ask your question? I was just going to come to you.
Yeah, I just thinking about the value proposition of investing as much time as you do. I think I see you built a kind of a niche in a business out of doing this. That's great. For me though, I'm thinking, in my business, I'm making a switch into one area into another platform that's working on fintech and emerging markets, and development. But it's not a huge shift. And I think that for me, it's more interesting to have a very small set of people that I want to reach out to, rather than having 10,000 followers. But even then, I'm not sure that it's really what kind of payoff there is for you and for everybody else, in terms of you're investing a lot of time, in this. And so there must be value that you see in that. What do you see in the value of that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's something I think about a lot, Tim, and I maybe should start just by honoring the reality that doesn't make sense for everybody. I 100% agree with that. I think for me, I feel like maybe about 5 years ago noticed that it was really important for my business and for my journey to be able to have some kind of megaphone that attracted people to the courses that we were teaching, the events like the one today that we were running, and that it's really hard to build megaphones in international development. We are siloed in our organizations. We are even more siloed as a community. We're all competing for the same funding. And so, I kind of did this analysis of all the different platforms and different ways to build community, and said, well, there are all these communities of practice that pop up and then close down all the time. Like LinkedIn is an enduring, well-financed network community with people are already on there. It's becoming the digital resume. I knew there were obvious use cases to feeding value back to the business. What I didn't anticipate, which I'm very grateful for, Tim, was all of the random, amazing subplots of life that it took me to, and the connections I made, the humans I met. And, some of it is just about like professional gratification. When somebody gets a job because they see a post that I put up, like, does it directly help tech change? Maybe not, but like, it's a pretty amazing feeling to know that you helped somebody do that. And I felt like I had a lot of relationship capital already built up, and that like helping to connect those dots was really great. So, yes, there's a business case. For me, there was also a personal case. The last thing I'll say is I am working with my coach to cut down on the time, right? Like, I think I've sprawled a bit, and now it's the point where I do have to be a little bit more judicious about how I spend my time, and trying to limit it to an hour a day here and there. But all kinds of people tag me for their posts and their opportunities. So it's, I've got some help now. Someone is helping me curate the post. That's been a huge difference maker. So I don't know, just a few key pieces. Hopefully that's useful.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Should we, maybe Mingo, do we want to take yours? And then we'll wrap. I know we're coming up on time. Mingo, you're trying to raise some money for organizations.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask about that and kind of gauge, you and other folks, what your feeling is on that, right? So I used to work at PAI. They do a lot of individual fundraising, right? And so I definitely want to like support their work and kind of get their messaging out there. I'm also on the board of an organization in DC called DC Scores. Individual giving is also a big part of what they do. So anytime I see something that they push out, I want to definitely kind of share that with the LinkedIn audience as well. And I see that there's like a kind of a good connection, right? Because if you're into youth development, if you're into soccer, then you'd be into like DC Scores and you maybe want to give, right? If you're into family planning and like SRHR, right? Sexual and reproductive health and rights, then you'd likely want to give money to them and to support them, right? But I'm just not sure if LinkedIn is necessarily the right network for that, right? I've seen it more increasingly as the network has grown, but interested to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, there is some fundraising that happens on LinkedIn. I think that I think about Facebook, Meta being better at this historically, kind of linking to campaigns, so to speak. Again, you kind of get into the challenge, which I mentioned earlier, which is when you add an external, like if you have a GoFundMe page or a nonprofit fundraising external site that you're trying to do your campaign on, adding that link into your post is going to 50% decrease the traffic that you're getting. And so if you already don't have a great, don't have a big kind of network, you're really gonna sort of suffer from just attrition in that sense. But at the same time, I think there are probably, the more you can connect the story, like individual stories, and do the storytelling in a post, and then the call to action is maybe a bit more subtle, and that's like a link and a comment, then I think that would actually do quite well. And being able to sort of say, here's the difference that this organization is making locally through this person's story. It's all very story driven, if that makes sense. And I think that's probably how I would approach it. But again, I traditionally more of a platform for connecting dots on jobs and opportunities and fellowships and such than doing fundraising specifically. Yeah, and Carmen, I don't know if you want to hop on and say anything here on this.
Hi everyone. I'm in Uganda, so my bandwidth may not help me with this virtual forum. But I, from my experience with LinkedIn since 2012, I did notice that a lot of people I talk to, they are underestimating the search function of it. You can find out a lot of information and actually categorize your search and label your search, to be more aligned with what you are looking for on the vast LinkedIn. And one example I wanted to give related to what is the value of your large network or connections on LinkedIn. From business development perspective, for example, if I or my company wants to pursue an opportunity in Uganda and I'm in Washington, DC, I don't know anyone in Uganda, LinkedIn and my connections in Uganda can help a lot. And you can set up a lot of meetings with people that you never met, but you are connected with on LinkedIn. And this is what actually happened in my professional experience and helped me a lot.
I think that's another great point, Carmen, and Tim, hopefully that adds to your question, is just the ability to, it gives you this template and this like mapping of your relationship that then allows you to extend it for additional opportunities, which I'm a disorganized person, so trying to do that through Excel or any other way feels really intimidating to me. So look, friends, I know we're coming up on time. My big takeaways, I'm going to send, I think we'll share the link to this deck that I did, and would just encourage y'all to follow each other, follow me. If you are come out of here with nothing else, like find a couple folks whose content you really like, and just start like find that little bell button on their profiles, and every time they post, you are commenting meaningfully on theirs. That is the best way to start kind of building a brand and a community. But hope I've inspired you to think a bit more about how to use it in your daily life, but also find that balance. And yeah, feel free, if you haven't already, to drop your LinkedIn profiles into the chat here, and let's follow each other. Let's make some connections today. Awesome. All right. Hey, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Oh, can we go back to Maggie as we end? That's a great point, Sharon. Maybe we can just wrap. Maggie, show us what you got. What was your final template here? And we will share this out too as we go on LinkedIn. So make sure you follow me and yeah.
All right, I'm still adding a little bit more because I'm trying to capture all of your great questions and some of those answers. Yeah, so just stay tuned for the updated version of all the great content and all the questions and answers that have been discussed today. So thanks so much for allowing me the privilege of just being here, a fly on the wall, and great conversation. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Maggie. We really appreciate you. Okay, thanks everybody, and we will see you on LinkedIn. I look forward to reading your comments and helping. Feel free to tag me, and I will help amplify your content, whatever it is. Okay, love this. This is going to be so cool, Maggie. Okay, all right. Take care, friends.